Welcome to a new episode of our podcast, Lead the Future. Change the conversation, an unedited, honest conversation to create the future. My name is Arjan Visser, and I'm your host. And join me as I chat with my friend Deb Brown Maher about healthy leadership is the answer. What could be the question? Deb is a sales coach, an author, and an insights promoter. She's an artist who helps you to see the bigger picture, take ownership, and serve others with your true value. Deb, it's an honor to have you back in the podcast.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks, Arjan.
Yeah, and I thought of a new series, and every time I got surprisingly new answers. So, with the statement like, if healthy leadership is the answer, what could be the question? That validates the need for healthy leadership.
Well, about 5 answers come to mind, which tells me it is kind of a trick question. So I need a little bit more before I can answer.
Yeah, trick question. Why do you think it's a trick question?
Because you're always turning things inside out. And when we put future first and work backwards from a future vision, all the answers have to change.
Yeah, that's true. It's a bit like composing a new piece of music with your current set of notes, chords,
Hmm.
and but how it's composed and brought together. I would say the overarching thing is your future perspective. So when we use our imagination to um, imagine how our vision, our dream, our purpose of life will manifest, we have that famous end in mind that we talk about in strategy. We do things with the end in mind. And like you said, like based on that, and we in futurizing, we use the name backcasting. We backcast from that future perspective, the manifestation of what we have hoped for. We backcast who we are becoming, understanding that who we are today is connected to our current circumstances, environment. Depending on
Mhm.
where you're at in your personal development, you're influenced by them or you influence them. And your future perspective in general is that there is a new setting. That's why we talk about where your why question is a where to question. I'm a mission to get to that new place, but that also means that I will become someone different or more unfolded, more authentic.
Mhm.
So based from that, I love to define what healthy leadership looks like, because it's part of my preparation, who I am becoming. And that's all I can focus. The circumstances will overflow as a result from that. And that's a bit different than thinking about credibility, track record,
Yeah.
um, because that's all based on past, yeah, success.
So when I hear the word healthy, what does it take to be a healthy leader? I think about self care, self nurturing, because if we are becoming a greater version of ourselves with more capacity, greater reach, um, if we are envisioning who we're becoming,
Yeah.
we have to be nurturing ourselves in order to get there because we haven't been there yet. So, in some regard, we only know what we've experienced heretofore, and we're preparing a path to get to the future. So, what's the gap? There are certain things in the way I operate, the way I think, the way I behave, the way I process, the way I integrate, the way I interact with others that have to shift in order for me to arrive at that future place.
Yeah. Well, maybe even gap is maybe a better word for gap is leap. Because when we take a gap, we see a hole, and then we borrow from our past experience, our skill set, how to fill that hole. And this is all about development, that greater version of ourselves. So if we see it as a leap, then we cannot fill it with past experience. So the only thing left is develop new competences to prepare ourselves for being that leader in the new setting where we are going to, evolving to.
I like the word leap because what that does is give permission to skip all of the forensic about the past, the analysis about what worked, what didn't, what to keep, what to keep in the backpack moving forward.
Yeah.
It's rather, and maybe I'm off, but it sounds like a conscious abandoning of past perspective in order to jump to something imagined, believed, somewhat calculated. So there's a risk, but when you leap, it brings a freedom.
Yes.
That staying tied to the past does not afford.
Yeah. Yeah, that just makes me think. We tend to say, like, everything you've learned in the past, you carry with you unless you wipe it out. But how do you do that? And with the leap, I can take my learned skills with me, but not the context in which I learned them and used to apply them, because the formats, they are not there in the gap. They could be there, but in the leap they can't be. So I take, everything from my past can work out for good in the future if I strip it away from the format, the reference frameworks,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is about the exploration of who you are becoming. And the more you find out about yourself, the more authentic you become.
It helps me to think about leaving the context behind.
Yeah.
Because that's the set of experiences. It's the finite. I don't even have a word for it, but it's a closed system where I showed up, I utilized my gifts and talents, and I got a result, good, bad, indifferent. And that we tend to, in the way we think, believe that I did this in this context, therefore doing this always results in X.
Yeah.
Instead of realizing the context is unique and in a completely different context, the gifts, talents, and skills applied can get you a completely different outcome. So it could be, just for example, if you're really good at public speaking and you speak, but the audience is not your ideal listener, the feedback that you get from that engagement is not going to be stellar. But shift the context, and the audience, and perhaps even the material, you're still bringing the same skills, talents, abilities, but because the context has shifted, the feedback you'll get will be much more positive.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that example. What you explain in a way is what I call life. But we are
Yeah,
in our workspace, we even separate it from life, and then we want to find the balance. Well, that's a bad idea if you want to grow up, you know. Um, but because with that separation, we have a fixed format. So we create what you said, the word, you make a success formula and you keep
right.
repeating it,
Yeah,
it becomes predictable, and you're not nurturing your self leadership, but you're actually nurturing your ego. And you keep repeating it, and you keep being praised because the audience and their feedback becomes predictable, and
hmm.
you climb the ladder. Well, in life, what we learn as in every phase of life, we apply in the new phase of life a different context all the time. So the most
Right.
organic way of learning and adding value to others is exactly what you described. So it sounds so far off of the work life, but that's because the work life disconnected from real life, organic living and learning, where it is normal that you learn it in a learning context and you apply it in the real world. You never trained in life to do repetitive tasks
No.
in a similar context as the learning environment. Never. But in work life, it is.
Hmm.
That's why we're also so afraid that we can be replaced by robots. Well,
Yeah.
because the context is not unique, the interaction is not unique, the other person is not unique, and you are not unique. So yes, that can be replaced by a robotic thing. But when it's human and real life, it's unique. It's always complicated, complex. It's
Hmm.
always life giving. It's always
Yes.
stretching. So that's why it's so hard, maybe, to quantify what is healthy leadership or authentic leadership, because it not.
Yes. My mind immediately goes to a list of characteristics that make someone healthy,
Yeah,
right? Um, but again, trick question. I think there's more to it
yeah.
than just that list of characteristics. Although they are important, there's more. What's the more?
Well, I think characteristics, but they're not as smart as the predictable ones. They're not as repeatable as the work life setting. But if you are authentic, it gives you joy, gives life,
Hmm. Yeah.
inspires others to make choices, take up ownership, not just show up, but also take ownership. So it inspires, it fuels. Um,
So now, aren't you talking about the fruit of operating as a healthy leader? Joy, life, speaking life, fostering ownership, those are all outcomes which I'm assuming you're saying only happen if a leader is healthy.
yeah. And they manifest depending on the context where they are applied. So
Right.
it's without the context, but I would say they give life. Well, we tend to say that's not a characteristic, that's fruit. But how do we characterize a healthy apple tree?
Well, but is it a context that a healthy leader is bringing that enables that kind of result?
Well, what you trigger by that, it's not really a question. I think you make a statement. It is. I remember a while ago in a peer mastermind group, the statement was made: what if freedom is not your core value, but it's the context in which your core values have their purpose and serve you? So if freedom is the context, well, healthy leadership creates an environment where there is freedom. And with freedom, I mean for people to expand who they are, for people to contribute from their creativity, for people to make their own choices,
To speak up, speak out.
speak up, speak out through who they are,
Mm-hmm.
for people to um, share their ideas. We tend to say, like, well, you need to speak. We have a speak up culture. Well, do we? If we don't have the context of freedom, then everyone will speak up in the construct that is there. You know, like yourself. The self nurturing. The people need to nurture themselves as well. Or maybe other words are like they need to become self aware, self actualization. That's would be all fruits. So the characteristics would be the requirements that create a context for them to bear that fruit. But they are your fruit as a leader.
Yeah. So if the leader doesn't understand, internalize, and express a healthy approach, then the environment can't either. So the leader, a healthy leader, has the goods to be able to model the goods and be an example that allows the freedom for others to step into that flow.
Yeah.
But it has to come from the leader first. Because if the leader doesn't have it, the team won't.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It just I always have to think of sailing when I talk about leadership or hobbies. Um, the sailor, the leader, the one holding the rudder and being the centerboard, which creates a stability in the boat, which is your authenticity and your authority. They can sail despite the circumstances. So the more authenticity and authority they have, they can sail with more wind. So
Yeah.
they are the context for the leader to create a safe trip. But those who are in the boat, the team
Mhm.
members, the followers of the leader, their circumstances are the safety within the boat, no longer the wind around the boat. So, and the boat can have as much wind as the leader
Can
can
handle.
can handle it. And actually, what he handles is not to be tossed around by the wind, but navigate
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah.
to he has vision for.
Make the wind work for him or her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if the leader makes the wind work for his environment, the safe boat that brings the people to where he has vision for, then the people are influenced by their circumstances is actually the leader, no longer the wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
although it will not be a easy ride, you know. But ask any open boat sailor, easy rides are boring. Then you take a motorboat, you know,
Right.
to get
Yeah.
more excitement in it.
Much
Well,
more fun to be the balance hanging off the side of the boat to
yeah.
help with the heavy wind.
And I can imagine that if you are in a sailing boat and they're just as a passenger and it is a exciting ride, you're not that excited, you know? You probably will throw up, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, but if you are involved,
Yeah.
then you enjoy the excitement and you lean on trusting the leader that the navigator, the sailor, you know, that he knows what he's doing with the boat, that he is above the physical limitations of the structures and all and so on and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's what a healthy leadership does as well. They involve their people, you know, challenges them so they can grow
Right.
to at the end sail bigger boats than the leader himself is sailing.
Mhm. Right.
That's, I think, where we see that that leaders multiply leaders. You know, we tend to lean on those kind of cheesy language, but it is in a way that's what actually is so organic, because when we have a good childhood memories, the good ones, that's what happened, you know. We were empowered to outgrow our parents,
Yes.
and they were not envy
Right. That's the
of
key.
our success, so they were not controlling us to slow down because we were outgrowing them.
Right.
And maybe they were not our parents, but then they were our, well, mentors. But they
Hmm.
became in that way like that was the healthy parenting. When they stopped nurturing, they started to empower us.
So, what they're doing is perhaps controlling the experience at hand. No, they're controlling the environment or the context, but not the experience. So, my experience on that sailing boat is dependent on the leader setting the course and me engaging to the level that I am able to or I'm tasked to engage. If I fully embrace whatever the task is that's mine, I will have a different experience than someone who shies back and does the minimum or refuses the task, right? So it's the setting is controlled, but the experience is up to the individual. And I think a healthy leader creates enough, creates a balance of safety and risk because it's safe if I already know. But if I know half and then the other half is new to me and I've never done it before, a good leader will inspire me to take that leap, to
Yeah,
try something that I don't have the context for, I don't have the track record for, because there's enough safety.
yeah, yeah. Well, absolutely. A
And
leader,
then growth happens, right? Because one of the characteristics of a healthy leader is they want their folks to outgrow them. And they're not, as you say, envious or threatened by someone advancing in skill or knowledge beyond themselves. In fact, they celebrate it and make a path for it.
yeah. I think that's a really good definition, and it paints for me a very vivid picture of what a healthy leader is. You know, they facilitate an environment, they control the environment for others to take that leap in
Yeah.
personal growth, so they can express more authentically more of themselves, which is of huge value for their personal growth. It's of huge value for their fellow team members because they are
Mhm.
inspired and uh, they excel in something else. So the sum becomes more of the parts, which
Right.
makes the business flourish as well because they benefit from more the sum that's more of the part than the parts, and that is extending, and that is again a blessing for their clients. So, and I think that is squeezed out in many settings because we want to predict and repeat the outcome.
Yeah.
And whatever the reason is, I think we can all make a long list what the reasons are about that. But it just addresses for me one other thing. The leader needs an environment as well to be challenged, to take a leap. And a leader can't do that with the people he or she facilitates to take a leap because their people are in that, they take that challenge, they take that leap because they trust the leader. But so for the leader, if they take a leap, they risk of losing the trust of their people because now they are learning by making mistakes and messing up and experimenting and
I'm not sure I agree. I think there are calculated ways for the leader to demonstrate a controlled amount of vulnerability. So I don't think it works all the time. I do think there are some ways that leaders can show that I'm learning too kind of effort, but it can't be at the cost of the safety and the trust of the team.
yeah.
So it needs to be chosen very carefully.
Well, if exactly when I take that sailing boat, you know, if I'm as a leader learning to sail another type of boat, I learn that in a different environment than the
True.
environment I'm learning my
Yes.
people to sail. You know, if I
Yes. Mhm.
because I you know I can't control the environment, so I need another setting, and I think that's where leaders become lonely if they forget
True.
that they need a learning environment too. And
Yes.
and it is false rationale if we say that's just part of the job, because then we are open for isolation as a leader, which is where we really shortcut our own personal growth and those of our people, which will lean in unhealthy leadership where we become envy of people their own growth because we are feel threatened.
Yes. That when it comes to the giant leaps that we take in our own personal development, those absolutely have to be done in an environment that is safe, and that is not with your team,
No.
because your team doesn't have the ability to comprehend the uncertainty that you are willingly embracing.
Yeah. Yeah. And every
There's
leader knows that.
Well, there's a dynamic tension between safety and risk
Yeah.
that is, it's a thread running through what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And I've heard you say before that as leaders, we have to embrace that dynamic tension. And as soon as that's gone, we're losing ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Say more about that. What?
Well, I truly believe that. Like, leaders are lonely. That's the statement I want to make in this one. So if a leader says, I am not lonely, then there are two options. they have a peer environment outside of the context where they lead people.
Mhm.
So I have a great team that supports me where we go. That's not what I mean. I don't believe in that. I know that you have people, but they are not fully free to stand up against you
Mhm.
because they have a dependency on you.
Yeah.
So you need an environment where people don't have a stake in each other's success
Mhm.
to develop yourself.
Yes,
So
if you're writing my job, my annual review, I'm only going to be just so honest with you about things that perhaps I'd like to see changed because my raise is tied to what you think of me. That's the kind of
exactly. So
dependence
and
you're talking
so
about.
that's your team member. But if you as a leader, you don't you're not in the ballpark park of having such a team, and you don't feel lonely, then I challenge you. Do you have a vision, a real vision? Not a repetition of the past, because that's a repetitive strategy. No, a real vision. Are you visionary enough to see something that's currently not yet possible? Well, if you have that, that makes you lonely, because if you share that with your people, you lift the safety, and it's no longer the environment they need. So
Right.
I say you have to embrace your lonely, but connect to that in action, because it's not an excuse for isolation, because that brings you back to that you will hurt the safe environment soon, because
Yes.
it will be envy threat. So again, find people around you have no stake in you, and you and I love to call that peer mastermind.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
just where everyone is equal, everyone has their personal development, everyone is stretched and confronted with brutal, honest feedback, without that filtering of I have a stake in your success.
Yes. It takes away the hesitancy. It also provides a freedom of expression and testing and trying things out
Yeah,
that if you do it with your flock can have, even if it's just one person that it upsets, then you have a problem now that you have to fix. So
yeah.
yeah.
So that's why I always joke with the African proverb: if you want to go fast and far, find your peers.
Hmm.
You know, don't choose for one or the other, but find your peers. So let's land it on that subject. Like,
Sounds good.
yeah, we can talk another hour, but we're running out of time for our 20-minute plus podcast.
There you go.
Yeah. So thank you, Deb, and
Thank you.
for everyone who have listened all the way to the end. Any trigger you heard, anything that resonated with you, whatever you felt positive or not comfortable about it, just embrace that trigger. And the first step is to connect with someone, connect with a peer. And if you don't know